Hi, I'm Cheryl, and I'd like to share my story with you. It's about my daughter Rachel, who is 8 years old. And it starts off on a Sunday morning, sitting reading the Sunday Sun newspaper. I see a young boy sitting in a hospital bed with his arms extended in victory, and he's just undergone a double lung transplant. My daughter Rachel comes up behind me and asks, why does this boy look so happy? He's in a hospital bed. So I explained to her that he got new lungs and he's really happy. And she said, well, what happened to his old lungs? So I'm explaining to her that he got sick and that he had to have an organ transplant. So she goes back to playing. A couple minutes later, she said, when I die, I want to give my organs so I can save kids. And in that moment, I was just so proud that she would embrace that thought of giving. So fast forward 5 weeks. My son Sean, who's 6 at the time, comes home with a flu bug. He's down and out for a couple of days. And then I come down with the flu. And then Rachel gets the flu. Well, unfortunately, Rachel's just took a whole life of its own. And after a week, I ended up taking her to the hospital. And they told me that she had a condition called ITP, where your antibodies attack the platelets instead of the virus. So they would transfer her to Sick Kids Hospital to monitor her platelets. Now, normally the platelets would multiply and you would recover. In a less than 1% chance, you can get a spontaneous bleed, and that can be in any of your organs, and again, it's recoverable. Except that with Rachel, her bleed was in her brain, and it didn't present itself in the same way with the same symptoms. So it took a while to figure out what was going on. We did a CT scan, and that's when they discovered that her brain was bleeding. So immediately they put her into brain surgery, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, a week ago my kids got the flu, now she's in brain surgery. What the heck is going on? The next day, after a couple of hours of surgery, they come out and they tell us that Rachel's brain had swollen too much and she was pronounced brain dead. So now she went to having the flu, brain surgery, and now my daughter's dead. You can imagine the devastation. I mean, my kids got the flu. Kids don't die from the flu. And so we all gathered in the room to say our goodbyes to Rachel. And my son is saying, well, who's gonna walk me to school? And I'm thinking, she's got a dance recital next week. Like, I mean, you're so devastated that it's like you can't even get your head around that this has actually happened. And the doctor asked me if I'd considered organ transplant. And I said no, but she had, because 5 weeks before, she had actually expressed it. So in my absolute worst nightmare, and you're absolutely powerless and helpless to save your child, the only thing that I could do was fulfill on her wishes. So I consented to the organ donation. And Rachel was able to donate her lungs, her heart, and 2 corneas. Her heart was transplanted into a 7-year-old girl and saved her life. The organs were flown down to the US into Pittsburgh and transplanted into a 13-year-old girl who had already undergone a heart and a lung transplant. So this was her 2nd lung transplant. So we gave her a second chance at life. One of her corneas went into an infant who had been blinded at birth and gave her sight. And the other cornea was transplanted into an infant who had been blinded in surgery. So she gave 2 people sight and saved 2 lives, which, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how that legacy lives in my heart as hope and beauty and love. And that's how my daughter is represented in my heart. And to this day, it's been 18 years. I still miss that little girl every single day. But, it's a journey. And we went through our grief and we grieved her well. It was just my son Sean and I at the time, and Sean had his music and his writing. He would write little stories about her, he would write songs about her, he would draw pictures about her. And it's so interesting to watch a 6-7-year-old grieve. He would come out and say, I miss Rachel. Well, then I'm down and out. I'm on the couch. I'm out for the count. And then in the next breath, he's like, what's for dinner, Mom? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even figure out how to put a meal together. You know, pizza pops are in the freezer. That's what's for dinner. That's about all I could muster up at the time. I remember driving and having to pull over to the side of the road, and I started to cry. Sean's in the back, and he said, "What's wrong, Mom?" And I said, "I can't remember where we're going." And he said, "We're going to get my hair cut." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I had to actually sit on the side of the road and gather my thoughts, figure out where I was and where I was going, because the concentration just wasn't there. I figured I had lost my mind. And, you know, I couldn't work. I ended up leaving my job because I would read a contract and 2 seconds later I couldn't remember what I read. I would be in a meeting and I couldn't repeat what somebody had said in the meeting. My concentration was gone. I just, you know, I had nothing to hang on to. I just felt like I was losing my mind. And I mean, I had so much support around me, but nobody can lift you out of that grief except yourself. And I was so connected to my daughter. It was almost like I had to be in this place of sorrow to stay connected with her. And I ended up doing a lot of public speaking because she was an organ donor. And Mike Harris and Don Cherry were heading up the Trillium Gift of Life at the time. They were putting a lot of money into raising awareness about organ donation. So I did some public speaking, and I would park my grief at the door, and then I would go and I would speak. But then 2 days later, I was on the couch. You know, I mean, there was times I was laying on my living room floor in fetal position, howling like a wounded animal. I mean, the physical pain of losing a child, it was just so painful. And I didn't want to carry on. Everybody said, "You got to be strong for Sean." I didn't have anything in me to be strong enough for myself, let alone for anybody else. The expectation just felt too huge for me to carry for everybody else. Now, having said that, I think I spent the first year of my grieving making sure that everybody else was okay. It was the Academy Award performance. And then when I reached the first anniversary, that's when I fell apart. And that's when I just couldn't go on. And everybody's journey is different. That's just what mine looked like. And I mean, it was 4 years before I actually said to somebody, "I think I'm going to survive this." And they said, "Oh, we always knew you would." And I said, "I didn't. I did not." It was, you know, death to me was a viable option. I just wanted to lay down and go to sleep and never wake up again. I remember seeing a counselor, and she said, "You know, why don't you just go in your bedroom, close the door, and just turn off the world?" And I started bawling my eyes out, and I said, "I can't." And she said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because if I go in, I will never come out." But you know what? I did. I went into my bedroom and I closed the door, and I came out. I came out on my own time, and I did everything possible. It was like the biggest fight of my life coming back from that grief. It was like there was another part of me that was so sad that it was like the point of no return. And then there was this strong, stubborn side of me that was not willing to give up. And it was just this constant conflict and this fight that I went through. And like I said, it was 4 years before I actually could put my head up and say that I'm actually going to survive this. But it is not without a lot of work and a lot of endurance and, you know, digging deep. And it definitely was a journey from my head to my heart. And I'm glad that I landed in my heart.